And on the Federal Reserve's 100th birthday, protesters are planning a day of national action. They're calling it FedUp 100, and people will head to all 12 of the Federal Reserve Bank branches throughout the country to call attention to what they say is an institution that, quote, exercises power in complete darkness. To talk more about this, I'm joined by Harrison Schultz, an activist with FedUp 100 in our New York studio, and the RT correspondent who brought us this report, Perianne Boring. Perianne, let's start with you. So as we look back at the Fed over the past 100 years, how would you say its role has really evolved?
Well, it started out as a banker's bank, as the lender of last resort, and it was established to create an elastic currency. That currency has changed from a gold standard to what we have now is completely fiat money, meaning it's backed by nothing but the promise of the government. And it has expanded the currency at unprecedented levels. So the role of the Federal Reserve has changed significantly over the past century.
When did we start to see it really spike in that direction?
Well, it's always been around wars. During World War I is when the Fed ramped up its printing press, helped fund for the war, and then that was when the Federal Reserve became an actual private agency. And then again, after the Vietnam War, that's when Richard Nixon closed the gold window and made us completely fiat, and that's really when we saw the unprecedented levels of money printing.
Very interesting. Harrison, your group, FedUp 100, has been critical of the relationship between the Fed and the big banks. You know, some people have said, though, that this relationship that they've cultivated helped the Fed save the economy in 2008 during the financial crisis, helped it from, falling into a Great Depression. What do you make of that argument?
Well, personally, I can't speak for all the activists who have gathered today to protest and to illuminate this black hole in our democracy. But personally, I don't think the Fed staved off a depression at all or a recession at all. I mean, I think on Main Street, we're all still feeling the effects of this monetary institution.
Sure. And Harrison, the Fed responded to the most recent recession by launching a massive stimulus program called quantitative easing. But how much transparency and oversight do the American people have into this program and programs like it?
Virtually none, as far as I know. I haven't seen any information on this, and I do believe that we are entitled to an audit, but I believe we're entitled to more than an audit. FedUp 100 is demanding that the Federal Reserve be federalized so that the Treasury has the ability to print money. And this will get us one step closer to putting the power to create money back in the hands of the American people as opposed to a private banking cartel.
Right. And one of the Fed mandates, of course, is unemployment. You know, given that the unemployment rate is still pretty high, what does that really say about how effective Fed policy has been for the middle class?
I don't think it's been effective for the middle class at all. I don't think it's been effective for the poorer classes, for the marginalized classes at all. I think this is an institution by and for the 1%.
And Perianne, FreedomWorks is an organization that has just released 10 reasons to abolish the Fed. Can you go over a few of the reasons why they're advocating for an alternative here?
Yeah, one of the biggest reasons is they believe it's unconstitutional. The power to coin money in the Constitution was clearly stipulated to be delegated to Congress. That would be overseen by 535 members. That's now been delegated to a board of a very select few, which are not elected by the people. That's another reason, is that these are unaccountable, unelected bureaucrats that are basically responsible to nobody. Also because it's very secretive, which we're talking about. The Federal Reserve has never been fully audited by an outside source. The GAO, which is another part of the government, has looked into its books some, but there's still so much about the Fed that we don't know. So because it's unaccountable, unelected unofficials, and it's so secret, that's why they just want to do away with it.
Was it Ron Paul that was actually pushing for an audit?
Right.
Where does that stand?
Well, Ron Paul is no longer in Congress. He retired last year. So in the House, we have Paul Brown, who was pushing that bill, and then we also have Senator Rand Paul, who's pushing it in the Senate. And he has said that he is going to hold up Janet Yellen's nomination, who's been asked to head the Fed when Bernanke steps down next year. And he's going to hold her nomination until that bill is brought to the floor. So there's a lot of debate around this right now, and it looks like that vote will come up early in January. So we'll see very soon where that's going to go.
Well, speaking of Congress, Harrison, I want to go to you. Obviously, Congress has a role in all of this. I mean, do you think recent Fed policies have been in response to sort of the gridlock we're seeing in Washington? Or how would you say sort of Congress is weighing in on all of this?
I can't speak to that, honestly. The one point I would like to make, however, is that we're not calling for a straight-up abolition or an ending of the Fed. I mean, I think that would be ideal, an ideal world that is dominated by local and alternative currencies, but I think that could cause some pretty big problems in this country if we were to proceed towards a straight-out abolition. What we're proposing, what FedUp 100 is proposing, is for the federalization of the Fed, and we're looking at a process. We're trying to propose a new process into the national conversation about how to go about tackling this issue. And bringing it under Congress is just a first step, because we have more control over Congress in spite of all the problems that Congress has than we do of the private Wall Street banks.
And Harrison, what exactly are you hoping for post-protest? You know, of course, it's great to get all of these people together, but I'm wondering, sort of, do you guys have concrete next steps in order to, you know,
yes, we do.
Coalesce
and
the movement?
tonight is just.
Go ahead.
Yes, tonight is just the beginning. I mean, obviously, the fact that this bill was passed 2 days before Christmas in 1913 should tell you a lot about the kind of people that we're dealing with here. And so tonight is just the beginning. This is a first step in a year-long campaign to illuminate the Federal Reserve, to start a grassroots educational campaign. You can find out more about this on FedUp 100 on Facebook. You can also follow us on @FedUp New York and @FedUp San Fran. And there's going to be plenty more announcements and plenty more actions. Ultimately, if our demand for the Federal Reserve to be federalized, if that demand isn't met by 2014, September 17th, then I think it's time to talk about reoccupying the Federal Reserve.
Absolutely. Well, we'll follow up with you and see where all of this goes. At Harrison Schultz, activist with FedUp 100, and RT's Perry Ann Boring. Thank you.
Thank you.